And there's the music, I think. Okay, now it's kicked in. Everyone, this is Yesshift, Ann Schinder, my dad, and I'm Steven Schinder, the son. And yeah, we're a father-son podcast. We talk about Yes and Yes members and their projects. And today it's a special someone's birthday, isn't it, Dad?
Absolutely. Patrick Moraz, an amazing musician, composer, keyboard player. Just really, I mentioned this. I played a gig last night, and the keyboard player is really into prog. And it was after the show, I think, and it was the breakdown time. And he said, "I'm going to say just one word to you." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Relayer." And I went, "Oh!" And I started like singing the music to different parts. And then I said, "Isn't it amazing?" Because he knew his birthday was today too. I said, "Isn't it amazing how one person can appear on one album of a band's 50 plus year career, but still have such a mark?" And then he topped me by saying, "With just 3 songs." And that's really the
Yeah.
truth of it. It's quite remarkable that not only is that by our poll the number one preferred Roger Dean album cover when we did a poll
Yeah.
on one
Well,
of
that
Roger's
and
birthdays.
Tails were on the top two. I don't remember the exact position,
I,
but
I
yeah, it's
think
very
Relayer
close.
came on top actually, but it's also amongst those who are on more the prog side of Yes, it's a way up there again with Tails. So it's quite interesting the impact he made, and I can't wait to talk about this Refugee album because I thought I had heard it, and I actually think maybe now I didn't because I had such a awakening wake up call when I listened to it to prepare for the show. So I got all kinds of things I want to bring up. And Steve and I don't talk about this. Like, right? We don't talk about this much, if at all,
Right.
before we go on the show. It looks like we're in two different rooms, but actually there's just a divider right there. Um,
Right. Yeah.
just kidding. I'm in Las Vegas visiting family and doing the concert and making some videos for something we're going to promote on Jump Talk TV and Steve's in Downey, California, and SoCal. But yeah, so I'm curious to see if you hear some of the same things I heard and have some of the same takes. So where do you want to begin?
Right. So you touched on it. Refugee, that other 1974 album that Patrick is on, that also begins with RE and has 7 letters. But before we get into that, I want to very quickly read a few posts that came out today, and related to Patrick. So over on Patrick's Facebook page, the admin wrote, "As Patrick celebrates his birthday today, he wants to send his best wishes for 2 fine musicians who share this birthday with him, Mick Fleetwood and the late Jeff Beck." And I
Wow, I
think I
didn't know.
yeah, and I think I also saw that it's Arthur Brown's birthday, and I saw him perform with Carl Palmer's ELP Legacy 5 years ago on the Royal Affair tour, and it was different hearing him sing the ELP material, but he definitely felt very in his element when he sang his own songs, and that was a brilliant concert seeing all those different bands. And um,
Gosh, I gotta find a bootleg video of that. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I think I might have a couple clips. I'll have to check later. But also on Patrick Moraz's Facebook page, it said a special message from Patrick's wife Phyllis. Happy birthday, mon amour. So I thought that was very sweet. I actually have the let me yeah, they actually posted a picture of the two of them standing together. So let me see if I can share that real quick. There we go. And yeah, there they are with the sunglasses. And so yeah, very nice message on there.
When is
Um,
that from?
I'm not sure when this is from. Maybe it's from a few years ago. I'm not really sure, but
Yeah,
yeah,
because
I
his
thought
hair's dark there and it's white now.
yeah, it's like grayish now, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really nice message. And
Yeah.
coincidentally, or perhaps not coincidentally, there's a post on Roger Dean's page where it mentioned that we have new stock of our limited edition relayer print. The print is a blend of the original painting and a fresh 2019 version, mixing inkjet and silkscreen printing. So yeah,
You
that
know what
looks
makes a
very nice
limited
there.
edition?
What?
There's a Where's Waldo figure in there somewhere that you got to find.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
kidding.
So yeah, people can go to Roger Dean's page, and there will be a link there to the site where they can order these.
Wait, yeah, go back,
Oh,
please.
okay, all right.
Steve's working the controls this time. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Roger's holding there is actually bigger than the original piece that we saw when we did the documentary a couple years ago, 2.5 years ago now in San Francisco at the exhibit, right? Isn't that even bigger than the original?
it's hard for me to tell. I'd have to look at our video again about the Secret Path exhibit,
I,
but
I'd say
yeah.
the original, and it would be shocking enough if it was the size he's holding given what's in the image. But I think the original is about 2/3 that size, or maybe 5/7 or something. It's smaller than that because
Yeah,
we both
because
had to lean in on it to look at it together on the wall. It was like I can't even show you. It was so small. It was like that big, maybe.
yeah, I think in my head I imagine it bigger, but maybe that's because I'm remembering how zoomed in the camera was when editing the whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, let's talk about Refugee. So, you said that you were not sure if you'd heard this before, right? So, what was your experience listening to this in the
It
lead up to that?
it was that, wow, I have never heard this. And the first track, Papillon, French for butterfly, sounds like the soundtrack to Following a Butterfly, but in a way, it also sounds like, I'm going to say, circus music, or would go great with a black and white sped up Keystone Cops flick. Um, it's really super playful, is full of nothing but dexterity, and it made me realize that had I heard this album before I heard Relayer, because this is right before Relayer, right? Given
Yeah,
the year 74. I think that, and I don't mean this in a way where Sound Chaser is less impressive, but I think I would have been a lot less surprised. Like, given what his playing sounds like, and even the other players, the compositions, Sound Chaser's less of a surprise, if you know what I mean. And a lot of Gates, but mainly Sound Chaser. I hear where his influence is really infused in there. Does that make sense?
yeah, I definitely heard bits of Sound Chaser. Um, And let me just read off the personnel real quick. So we have Patrick Moraz, of course, and we have Lee Jackson on bass, guitar, and lead vocals and such, and Brian Davison on drums, and a bunch of things that are on here. And Lee and Brian were both in The Nice a few years before this. Let me stop sharing this so I can move my mouse a bit better. Um, so I do sense like some of the nice sound on there. But Papillon, so I feel like listening to this album in preparation for this, I had the opposite experience where I could not remember if I had listened to this album, but then once I started listening to it, like it all came flooding back. Like, oh, I remember listening
Oh,
to Papillon in like 2008 and realizing that it's part of Patrick's solo in the Yes Live at
oh,
QPR video. And I think
oh,
over
yeah.
time, um, as I listened to Story of I, Patrick's first solo album, I noticed that that sound, that is also on Kachasa, I think, one of those songs that's on there.
Yeah.
So something that he reused from Papillon is on Story of I and in that solo. But yeah, once I listened to it this time around, I was like, oh yeah, I do remember having this reaction, noticing how familiar this song sounds.
Yeah.
And it's really great stuff. The instrumental, very, very long instrumental portions on these songs, to the point where I would sort of forget that there are that this is a vocal album. I kind of, as I'm listening, I think, okay, yeah, this album is fully instrumental, and then the vocals come in, and I'm like, oh yeah, there are vocals on this album. I was just so invested
Exactly.
on
I
the
had the
instrumental
same.
parts.
Yeah, I had the same thing. And there are two long pieces, 16, 18 minutes. First one being Grand Canyon Suite with different named sections of it, like Close to the Edge. And then there's Credo. And it's interesting that, you mentioned Lee Jackson having been in the Nice. And when we think of the
Yeah, and
Nice, we
Brian as
think,
well. Yeah,
yeah, and we think of Keith Emerson. But I heard a lot of what I would call ELP influence, but I think that
yeah,
ELP influence was influenced really by the Nice. And in some spots, Lee's voice sounds so much like a very young Greg Lake from the first couple albums. It really grabbed my attention, and then some of the musical passages as well. Um, if I wasn't familiar with this and someone said, "Hey, these are some unused ELP tracks from early on," I may have believed it by the structures of them and the staccato, ta-tan, ta-tan, ta-ta-ta-ta, stuff like that, and his voice. It was really interesting, and I think this album's under mentioned, under praised, and under distributed. Like, I'm pretty into prog, and I never dove into this. I never was influenced to do so, really. So I highly recommend for people, if you're into Yes, into ELP, hoping people listening to this are into Yes, but obviously into ELP, the Nice. This is really a neat album, man. It really is.
yeah. I was definitely reminded of ELP as well, and the way that Patrick is able to do what he does on this album, and you can even hear a bit of the spaciness of his sound
Oh,
that he would do on
that's right.
Story of I, and something like
Yep.
Rhythmically, which well, I'll read the track list real quick. So on side A, we
Yep.
have Papillon, Someday, and Grand Canyon Suite. And then side B, we have Gate Crasher, which I was very surprised how short that one was at only
I
one
know,
minute.
and I love the name. It doesn't take
Yeah.
long to crash a gate. That's why it's so short.
Yeah. Well, hey,
You
maybe
just
it's
drive
a
through it.
maybe it's a prelude to Gates of Delirium. I don't know.
Oh,
Um,
wow, what a trip. That didn't occur to me.
and then
Whoa.
rhythmically, the name of that song came from Patrick saying that they should play it more rhythmically, and his accent and stuff. And then Credo is the other long form piece on here. That one's 18 minutes. Grand Canyon Suite is 17 minutes. I had forgotten that there were a couple long tracks on this album, and it's very proggy, and also feels jazzy in places. It's really good, and the whole like I was saying, Patrick's sound on here, it reminded me that, in the pantheon of prog rock keyboardists, people will think of Rick Wakeman, Keith Emerson, John Lord. I think Patrick deserves a place on there as well. Like, he's just so
Yeah.
brilliant on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony Banks.
Yeah, yeah.
It's usually those, you're right, those are the mentions. And Patrick, if you're not convinced by, and how could you not be, by Relayer, or if that's really all you're familiar with, this is so worth it. It really is. I think if you're not sure, just go to one of those long pieces and just jump through it, shuttle through it, and you'll be like, okay, I gotta listen to it.
Yeah. And what's funny about the whole, we've talked about the Nice and the ELP as well, is it makes you really think about how Keith Emerson was asked by Steve Howe to join Yes for Relayer, even though he was in ELP. Is like, why would I need to be in Yes and I'm in ELP? And so
Yeah, I have my own
it's
band.
funny. Yeah, it's funny how there's this sort of snake eating its own tail thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I also was able to listen to the live recording of Refugee playing at Newcastle, and this was, I told you before the show that this was on June 16th, 1974, and June 16th is my brother Alex, your other son's birthday. So I thought that was funny. And
Yeah.
at that particular concert, at least, they played a track by The Nice, as well as a cover of a Bob Dylan track, which, the Bob Dylan track was originally 3 minutes, but since it's Prague, they have to make it like 9 minutes. That Bob Dylan song was She Belongs to Me. And the Nice song was The Diamond Hard Blue Apples of the Moon, which was a B-side of one of the Nice's singles, which was America, not the Simon and Garfunkel one, but the West Side Story one.
Yeah, isn't that weird too?
Yeah.
But my brain still has a barnacle left over from when you said great gate crasher being a prelude to Gates of Delirium. And the other thing that occurred to me is I wonder if there's any pre-relayer keyboard solos by Pat where we might hear glimpses of some music that snuck into To Be Over or Sound Chaser or Relayer, even if they're just little passages. That would really be interesting, as some things that he had in his head for a while got portioned into those pieces to be galvanized,
Yeah. Well, from the stuff I listened to, I didn't notice anything like that. But like I said, on this album, I could hear, in places you have the pacing of Sound Chaser, the speed of the drumming, definitely funny enough. And it's
Yeah.
really cool. Like, you really see what Patrick brought into that song and how he might have been influenced by his work in this band as well. And it really makes you think. And Refugee only had one album, and they basically ended because Patrick left to join Yes. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, what would the next album have been like? They played something that they were saving for their next album on the tour called One Left-Handed Peter Pan. But, if Patrick had stayed with Refugee and they had done another album, like, what would that have been? And what would Relayer have been like if, Patrick wasn't on it? You wouldn't have Sound Chaser, and maybe
you would have Gates, because John talks about how he just sort of banged at the piano and sung the ba-bam, ba-bam, ba-bam. He's trying to like.
Right.
But I have a question for you. Two things. One, to stay on your topic first, why didn't Pat reconvene with the guys after the one album with Yes? That's kind of an interesting mystery.
Yeah, well, that's a good question.
Some people don't get remarried. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, like, time had passed. Patrick was, after Relayer, he was touring with Yes, and then they agreed to do solo albums and come back for a tour showcasing a little bit of their solo stuff. And Patrick was involved with Going for the One very early on, but before, Rick came back into the picture. So by that point, it had been 3 years since this Refugee album, and maybe everyone had moved on. I know that Brian Davison, I believe, went on to join Gong. And so, yeah, so maybe everyone was on different paths, and of course Patrick would end up with Moody Blues for quite a while,
which I always thought was weird. I did nothing against the Moody Blues, but I always thought that was sort of I want to put it nicely, no pun intended,
like maybe a stylistic pivot in a way.
Yeah, that made him seem underutilized or something. I don't know. I mean, having said that, we heard Genesis, sort of more commercial phase with these virtuosos. So I know it might not be fair for me to say, but it's just an observation. And I think you put it best. Stylistically, it was a pivot for him that maybe threw people like me for a loop that were familiar with his work with Gates and, all that stuff. But here's a little, maybe not curveball, but something to maybe be briefly contemplative on. Here's this. everyone, and they're right, everyone says how different Wakeman and Moraz's styles are, right? And they are. They're
Yeah.
very different. But now that I've heard Papillon by Patrick, compare that to Merlin by Rick Wakeman, and it's
Oh
got
yeah.
right. It's
Yeah,
got a
because
little bit of that
when you said
circus.
circus music, I did think of Merlin the Magician, you know.
Yeah,
You know, there's a
yeah.
similar sensibility there.
There's totally a similarity there. It'd be funny to have those two in a room playing somehow a blended version of those, or doing trades, call and response with those two pieces. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
And call it Merlin and the Butterfly.
Yeah. Yeah, and another thing to take into account in terms of how different would Relayer have sounded would have been depended on which keyboardist they would have gone with instead. Because you know we've heard they consider Vangelis, but I guess the personalities were kind of
And
different.
I could see how he wouldn't have been a fit, I don't think, musically. But aside from that, do we know whether or not they considered anyone else?
No, I think we only know about Vangelis and Keith
Yeah.
Emerson. I don't think we know about anyone else.
Yeah.
But
So I wonder
yeah,
what it would have been if Keith guested on it. I don't know if we would have gotten any of those pieces, or if we did get Gates, I can almost sort of hear how if you listen to Tarkus and Carnival 9 or something from Trilogy, that feel, that those layers of colors, if you will, on top of Gates, I think the war section would have been even more darker, if you will. I don't know. Does my adjectives make any sense whatsoever?
yeah, I can see that because Tarkus does have some darker parts, and yeah, maybe that very well could have been the case.
Yeah. His, organ, Hammond organ slides, that kind of stuff. I can hear that too. That kind of stuff. Whereas Patrick's approach is a little bit more pristine, if you will.
Mm.
It's cleaner, if you will. Whereas I could see Keith getting in there and getting that dirty distortion with his B3, and just, it'd be interesting, but we'll never,
Yes,
this is
sort
all
of.
imagination. It's all theater of the mind and prognosticating, or not even that. It's dreaming. It's daydreaming. Welcome to my
Yeah,
daydream. There's a good name for an album.
yeah,
Reimagine all these songs in different styles. In what if this person played on this song styles?
yeah. Maybe even adding to the wonderful chaos in the middle of Gates of Delirium, like that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's when he'd
Um,
pull the daggers out, throw the organ on the floor.
yeah, gotta love Keith Emerson, the late great
Y-
Keith. Um,
Yeah, miss
Yeah,
you.
we also, yeah, definitely. We also have some comments that I saw earlier when I was posting in a few different groups about this album.
Cool.
So we got Dave Pilgrim who says, Refugee were a really great band. It's a shame they didn't last long, but they made this.
Oops. Either I froze or Stephen froze. Uh-oh. Are you there, Steve? Oh no. Folks, I don't know if Steve froze or if I'm frozen. Um, so I might just vamp a little bit. I don't have access to those comments from where I am right now, so I'm not sure. And the clock is still ticking, I see. So I think Steve froze. But if you're watching this live or even on the archive, go ahead and comment, whether you're watching us on Drum Talk TV, Yesshift's Facebook pages, respectively, or the respective YouTube pages, channels for both Yesshift and Drum Talk TV. And give us your take of Patrick on his birthday. It was Steve. Patrick on his birthday, or as we're celebrating, or his work with Refugee, either of his solo albums, anything like that. I met Pat a couple times very briefly. Once was backstage at the Union Tour in Los Angeles in the Forum Club. And the other time was about 5 years before that, maybe, where West LA Music in Los Angeles used to have, at the LAX airport, they'd rent out, I think, a few floors on the Hilton, and have kind of like a a NAM showish kind of thing. And Patrick was there demonstrating some gear. Just, he just seems like a really happy guy, But what amazing music. And I'd love to get people's takes when they first put on Sound Chaser, what that sounded like to them. New album, new keyboard player. You take one player and switch them out of the Yes equation, and it's never been like, oh yeah, those kind of the same but a little different. It's always been drastically different. Of course, replacing the great Peter Banks with Steve Howe was such a huge change. Replacing Bill Bruford with Alan White was a huge change. And Steven's back. Welcome back, Steve. We've missed you. I was just kind of
Okay, yeah,
vamping
I don't know
talk.
what.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
don't
was
know
just
what happened with
carrying
my
on some
Wi-Fi just now.
conversation. That's okay.
Okay.
I'll remind you where you were in a minute, but I was just, giving some people some fodder to chime in on, and, mentioning that what their first take was with a new keyboard player, new album from Yes when they first heard Sound Chaser. But you left off where we saw you leave off was when you were reading the comment that said, Refugee was a great album, and then you froze when you were reading the
Oh,
comment.
okay, yeah. So Dave Pilgrim said they were a really great band. It's a shame they didn't last long, but they made this brilliant album. And what I was trying to say as I got cut off by the lords of the internet or whatever, was that it's great that we have at least this one album rather than not have any album from them at all.
Yeah.
So then we also have a comment from Bruce Irwin, who said, I read about Patrick joining Yes, and I wrote to JEM Importers and asked about Moraz and his earlier group Main Horse. JEM wrote back and recommended Refugee. I immediately ordered it. We were prepared when we heard Relayer. I knew Patrick was going to fit in Yes. He helped make Yes make one of their best albums. The Relayer tours were amazing. And that's fascinating to me because it seems like to Bruce, this Refugee album prepared him for Relayer. But to me, the albums, there are some similarities, at least in terms of Sound Chaser, but the rest of it feels very different to me.
Yeah, that is interesting. Thanks, Bruce. That's a great take.
Yeah, and Luis Dosh says, I wish they would have done a follow-up. Yeah. Lazaro Vergara Pete says the Nice 2, great. Yeah, it does kind of feel like the Nice Mark II in a way.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and Pete Wilder says, I discovered this band in the late 80s. My friend, who was a huge fan of Moraz and Relayer, had a copy, and we ended up playing it over and over again. I don't think I have a favorite track, but I thought it was fascinating to hear a band that was mostly a vehicle for Patrick and a singer that was very unconventional. I will say the heartfelt Someday was inspirational to a broke young man who was living in a crappy town and uncertain future. I look at my life now and can't believe how fortunate I am. Yeah, it's great to hear that you're in a better place. And yeah, albums can do that. They they come in at a certain time in your life and they can make you remember like how things used to be.
I'm wondering what the crappy town was.
Yeah, that's a good question.
If either of us lived there, we should move.
Yeah. And over on YouTube, All One Same says, Happy birthday, Patrick Moraz. Yeah. 76 now.
Wow. Isn't it amazing how aged everybody's becoming? I played a show last night in Las Vegas that was a tribute to the hits of Genesis and the Police. And then after the show, we went home to, not where we're staying at Aaliyah and Abel's house, but we went home to Shahada and Jimmy's house. And they were at the show. And Jimmy asked me, what songs would you want to play with this lineup that you didn't play? So I mentioned right away Synchronicity 2. I had him pull it up on his phone from their reunion tour and showed it on their big screen. And then I said, wow, that guitar player, he's I think Andy Summers is 80 now. And it made me realize, well, John's 80 and Pat is 76. And everyone's like, I mean, I'm in my 60s, so of course all these fuckers are old. I am now. I
Yeah.
just thought that it's just so interesting. Like, how is that possible? Well, I won't go there. Never mind. Anyways,
No, yeah, I get what you mean. Like the other day when I was talking about the Soft Machine show that I saw, the
yeah.
guitarist John Etheridge is in his mid 70s and he still plays that guitar like so well, and he has a great sense of humor. So
Yeah, you mentioned he was really
yeah.
funny. Can you throw us an anecdote?
Well, it's all on the review of the concert that I did, but
Okay, and
um
I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to watch it. Tell everybody where that is so they can see it. It's on the Yesshift page, right?
yeah, it's
And
on
YouTube channel.
Yesshift
Okay,
on YouTube, Facebook. You can find
okay.
us at Yesshift and also anchor.fm/Yesshift.
See that, folks?
Um,
He won't even throw me a bone. He's going to make me watch the review to figure it out. So don't feel bad. He didn't give us something.
right, yeah. So before we end this episode and tease what's coming up tomorrow, do you have anything else to say about this Refugee album?
I wish, and I wonder if there's any sort of reunion performance they ever did post Relayer. Like, we know they didn't get back together, but I wonder if they ever showed up somewhere together and one sit in with the others, or if they did some sort of, sometimes reunions pop up for benefits, charity events, or festivals, different things like that. I'd like to know if anyone knows if there's anything out there, because I'd love to hear them live post that album and into further years with more wisdom in their brains and more newer creativity, but also newer sounds with, just to see what an advanced version of that band would be. Advanced not in skills but just in time. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm babbling now.
No, yeah, I am curious if they ever did something like that. I know Brian passed in 2008. There was, the Nice did do, I think, a one-off reunion in the early 2000s, and there were other bands that were sort of doing that in the 2000s. So I
Yeah.
do kind of wonder if, even if it wasn't a publicized reunion concert, if they ever met up and just jammed or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Very.
but yeah,
Excuse me.
this is
Very cool.
a really fun album to listen to. And the Newcastle stuff I actually listened to via the Bluetooth setting on my record player that I have. It
Oh,
has
cool.
Bluetooth, so that was really fun.
Nice.
So yeah, happy birthday to Patrick Moraz. And as for what's coming up on Yesshift, tomorrow, June 25th, at 9 a.m. Pacific US, noon Eastern US, 5 p.m.
Hiccups.
UK times. We're having John Mitchell and Harry Whitley on for an interview about the upcoming Asia Heat of the Moment tour. They're part of this new lineup with Virgil Donati on drums, and of course Jeff Downs. And I think they started rehearsing not too long ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be cool having both Harry and John on the show and having them sort of, spill the beans on the whole thing.
Yeah, and we'll reach out to Virgil for Drum Talk TV for a Drum Talk TV interview that will also simulcast here.
Okay, yeah, we'll see if we can do that. I know their tour starts early July, so
Okay.
yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Awesome. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. You can find us, Yesshift, that is. You can follow Yesshift on Facebook at facebook.com/Yesshift, youtube.com/@Yesshift. And you can, if you're an audio listener only, you can find us at anchor.fm/Yesshift and write us at
Yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. Yeah, I knew I forgot something earlier. Are you frozen or are you doing a
no,
bit? I can't tell.
I was just screwing with you.
Okay. All right. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And again, happy birthday to Patrick. Have
Happy
another
birthday.
great one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye.